Today we follow on the post that started our new year off at Moondust Cosmetics, and that was the top 11 actions we can take in our households to contribute to the global effort in mitigating climate change. My name is Helena, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Moondust, founder and primary researcher at Moondust Cosmetics.
Hello, Helena.
Now, our topic today, Dr. Moondust, expands on your suggestion number 11 on that list, which was nuclear weapons and modern warfare are contrary to climate action. I'd like to add that this topic might feel like a heavy and sometimes a distant issue from our daily routine. But from what you've published on this topic, nuclear radiation definitely affects every one of us, from the food we eat to the very air we breathe in the course of our day. It seems that wars waged impact us no matter their location or duration. In our conversation today, we're sure to learn more about our shared concerns for climate action, and especially about radioactivity and radioactive metals circulating in our atmosphere due to weaponry currently in use. Dr. Moondust, can you help us understand more?
Certainly, Helena. Recently, many parts of the world have been contaminated with radioactive waste from depleted uranium bombs and projectiles, including the Arabian Gulf, Iraq, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia, Afghanistan and Syria. Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the uranium enrichment process employed in nuclear reactors. It has been used to make depleted uranium bombs and to coat bullets, which are effective armor-piercing projectiles since the 1990s. Other areas of the globe have also been contaminated by nuclear weapons testing sites.
I wonder, what does this mean for us then?
Well, in this atomic age, exposure to toxins in the environment includes radioactive heavy metals, and their detoxification has become an issue of considerable importance for everyone. There are 3 naturally occurring uranium isotopes that are of major significance with regard to mining of this element and the nuclear industry: U-238, U-235, and U-234. And by the way, U denotes uranium. The half-lives of these radioisotopes is approximately 4,500 million years, 703 million years, and 246,000 years, respectively. That's how long it takes for their radioactivity to disintegrate.
Those numbers are utterly mind-boggling. So does that mean that we're exposed to radiation all the time?
Basically, yes. It is something of note, particularly for official governmental agencies dealing with the cleanup of environmental pollution and setting regulatory health standards for such hazards in the surrounding environment. Heavy metal exposure can occur in humans potentially through the air, water, and soil via the food chain. However, depleted uranium exposure is most likely to occur via inhalation. The biological effects of environmental radionuclides in humans, particularly depleted uranium, have been documented as part of the Gulf War syndrome and Balkan syndrome. They include incapacitating fatigue, musculoskeletal and joint pains, headaches, neuropsychiatric disorders, confusion, visual problems, changes of gait, loss of memory, respiratory impairment, impotence, and urinary tract morphological and functional alterations.
Wow, that sounds very, very unpleasant and far-ranging.
It certainly is. My first personal experience with depleted uranium exposure was in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I attended a science conference a few years ago and developed some of those very symptoms. By far, it was the worst experience of my life, despite a very short exposure period. Now, much of the cancer and birth defect data come from Iraq. The overall incidence of breast and lung cancer, leukemia, and lymphoma has doubled or tripled in certain areas of Iraq contaminated with depleted uranium during the Gulf Wars. There have also been reports of an increased incidence of birth defects and possibly infant mortality in Iraq since the advent of the Gulf Wars. In addition, an increased incidence of congenital anomalies and perinatal mortality has been reported in Kuwaiti newborns, and birth defects have been reported in the newborns of Gulf War veterans. Some studies with U.S. Gulf War veterans have reported cancers of the upper aerodigestive tract, lymphoma, and leukemia as health consequences of depleted uranium exposure. World Health Organization statistics for the years 1998 to 2000 suggest an elevation in lymphoma and leukemia incidence for the Eastern Mediterranean region affected by the Gulf Wars. Interestingly, according to the World Health Organization, there also appears to be an elevated incidence in cancers of the trachea, bronchi, and lungs in Europe during the years 1998 to 2000, possibly due to other regional wars. For example, depleted uranium weapons were deployed in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia by NATO.
Oh my goodness, these are very significant health hazards. What can we do about this?
Soil remediation, phytoremediation, and human detoxification are the main issues to be considered in relation to environmental contamination with uranium and its decay products. The remediation of uranium and other radionuclide contaminated soils is a complex, labor-intensive, and expensive undertaking. A typical project can cost more than 200 to 300 billion. Bioremediation of soil with microorganisms appears to be one of the most cost-effective and ecologically appealing strategies available. Bacteria can utilize various mechanisms to sequester uranium. However, microorganisms are difficult to control and can mutate quite easily. They could potentially take over the environment. Phytoremediation is the use of green plants to remove pollutants from the environment or to deactivate them, and is based on exploiting the metabolic diversity of plants. On the downside, the latter has low extraction efficiency, generates large quantities of contaminated radioactive biomass, and requires long periods to complete the decontamination process. Metal chelation therapy, citrate, and zinc supplementation may represent possible methods of uranium detoxification in humans. There is no published data relating to the effectiveness or viability of these treatments in patients with 100 or 200 times the normal body burden of uranium, such as the levels found in victims living in war zones like Afghanistan. Since metal chelation depletes the body of micronutrients, which need to be replenished, and only removes a limited quantity of toxic elements, such a course of treatment might extend over a period of many years. At the same time, metal chelation therapy is a costly and highly unpleasant treatment for patients to undergo. And I do know this from personal experience.
This is not sounding very good at all. I wonder, what are some of the environmental effects of depleted uranium and uranium?
Well, Helena, uranium is known to be highly toxic to plants. Plants experience oxidative stress in response to heavy metals, resulting in cellular damage and disruption of cellular homeostasis, similar to that observed in animals and humans. As a result, they have evolved detoxification mechanisms, mainly involving chelation and subcellular compartmentalization, to minimize the toxic effects of heavy metal exposure. This means that plants accumulate the metals to varying degrees and can pass them along in the food chain to animals and humans. A distinct biological effect on wildlife has been observed for various isotopes of uranium. An irregular distribution of U-234 and U-238 has been found in the tissues of marine birds from the Polish area of the southern Baltic Sea. The highest accumulation occurs in the liver and other organs, along with the feathers, while the smallest accumulation occurs in the skin and muscles, with apparent interspecies differences. Depleted uranium can cause adverse reproductive effects in terrestrial animals, and the likelihood of this can range from 0.1% to 44% between various species. Animal studies indicate reproductive toxicity and teratogenicity occur as a result of uranium exposure. Depleted uranium displays estrogenic activity, leading to an increased risk of fertility problems in mice, and it can cause cell apoptosis in mouse kidney. Cell studies show that depleted uranium causes apoptosis in mouse macrophages, and uranium promotes oxidative stress in rat lung epithelial cells, which can also induce apoptosis. Events associated with apoptosis have been observed following uranium treatment of isolated rat kidney mitochondria.
Now, Dr. Moondust, you've given us an awful lot to think about from the scientific perspective and, of course, the narrative between that really affects us. I wonder if you can give us a final analysis, Dr. Moondust.
Yes. In conclusion, uranium contamination due to the continued use of depleted uranium weapons and nuclear accidents has potentially far-reaching consequences for humans and wildlife populations. In fact, it could prove to be an unprecedented ecological hazard. Moreover, the remediation of uranium and other related radionuclide contamination is an extremely complex and expensive biological and environmental problem. Currently, there is limited data available on effective remediation methods for the removal of uranium in contaminated areas. Furthermore, remediation measures are of indeterminate efficiency, as the ratio of uranium contamination to soil, uptake by plant species, and the total body burden in humans increases. As a primary health and ecological measure, it is suggested that an immediate global ban should be placed on the use and manufacture of nuclear and depleted uranium weapons. Violators of the ban should be made to bear all remediation and public health costs. And of course, there is always the option for us to conclude that war is not a desirable activity.
Thank you, Dr. Moondust, for your insights that you've shared today, and always those small steps that we can take towards a more positive result. And thank you, dear listeners. This series continues next month with a new discussion. To receive our newsletter with the new posts pertaining to healthy lifestyles, and in particular skin and sun care information you can use as you work, play, or travel in our environment, please join us and subscribe at moondustcosmetics.com. Thank you again, and until next time, we'll see you soon.